Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Our speakers are Emily Allen-Hornblower, Nafeesah Goldsmith, and Marquis Mcrae. And the program is Rediscovering Our Humanity, Reading the Classics Behind the Bars and Beyond. Emily?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to Betsy Lightburn and to the Philadelphia Ethical Society for inviting us to speak today. We're really thrilled to have the opportunity to hold a late morning conversation about Greek drama and its resonance, especially for formerly incarcerated persons, along with the rest of you. And there will be a Q&A to follow as well after our moderated conversation. My name is Emily Allen-Hornblower. I'm a professor of classics at Rutgers University, and I've also been teaching in men's medium and maximum security prisons for the last 5 years. My work focuses on the power of storytelling and ancient Greek epic and drama, and I'm especially interested in portrayals of the human and factors of connection and disconnection between individuals and groups. And when I've been teaching behind bars, including the classics, the discussions that we've had were so illuminating and thought-provoking that and the connection's so palpable, I should add, that I've been seeking out public venues to be able to share some of these conversations with the broader public, these conversations about ancient works with now formerly incarcerated re-entering citizens and with you. And I've been able to do this thanks to support from the Whiting Foundation and also from the Society for Classical Studies. So I want to thank them as well. And we've done a few of these. We also did one at Rutgers, which was perhaps the most challenging and also enlightening at the Players Club, at the New York Society for Ethical Culture, and now we're really thrilled to be here at the Philadelphia Ethical Society. When Betsy Lightburn got in touch with me a year ago, almost to the day, to ask me if I would come and give a talk about teaching classics in prisons at the Philadelphia Ethical Society, it was understood that one of our key themes would be how conversations about the ancient world help to build civic bridges. And so much has happened since then. The pandemic, of course, but also now more than ever, an increased sense of urgency in all of us that we so desperately need to foster and cultivate our sense of shared humanity. And so that's going to be our focus today. And before we begin such a conversation with my fellow speakers, who I'll be introducing in a moment, just a quick technical note. This is a Zoom event, and like life itself, technology is messy, and that's okay. We'll forget to mute or unmute, and we'll remind each other. And I may be a guilty party as well. You'll probably hear my children because I'm right near the bathroom at some point, and my dog. And thank you all for being here and for sitting through all the inevitable glitches that we'll work through. So some of you have written in advance apologizing for having to leave early. And of course, we're delighted that you could come even for just a little bit. So thank you again for being here. I want to start by giving a chance to my fellow speakers to tell us a little bit about themselves today, and then I'll tell you how I met them, and we will look at some Greek tragedy and get into the thick of conversation. Nafeesah, if you want to unmute and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nafeesah Goldsmith. And I am an organizer and a social justice advocate. I first began organizing in a really, I would say, non-traditional way, which was during my 13-year incarceration at Etna Man Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey. I was fighting to keep a college degree program there at the prison for us women, which resulted in a statewide coalition. So now individuals all throughout the state who are incarcerated can get their degrees. So that was the first time I began organizing. When I was in the halfway house, I earned my associate's degree in sociology at a community college, and then went on to Rutgers University, where I received my bachelor's in sociology and political science. From then, I have done numerous speaking events around issues, not just regarding social justice, but particularly criminal justice and the effects that it has on families and communities. That gave birth to something else, which is called RISE. That is my company. It's an LLC, in which it means Real Intervention Supports Excellence. And what I wanted to do by creating RISE was to give people in communities the power that they need to be able to build a sustainable, not only community, but sustainable family units. And I'm really happy to be here, and I hope that you all enjoy the program.
Thank you so much, Nafeesah, for being here. I should add that, of course, Nafeesah and I met at Rutgers, where she completed her degree thanks to the Mountain View program, which helps formerly incarcerated individuals through admission and through finishing their degree at Rutgers. And Nafeesah, like Marquis, has an infant. So both of them are especially I'm especially grateful that you're making time on a Sunday morning to do this. Marquis and I met in a class that I taught behind bars at East Jersey State Prison almost 5 years ago now. And it's incredibly moving and meaningful to now be here in a very different context from the clanging of gates and everything else that goes on inside the prison, and to be here together today. Marquis, can I invite you to unmute and tell us a few things about yourself?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, good morning. I'm Marquis Mcrae. I am a mass incarceration survivor and a witness to the effects of mass incarceration. I'm here to support Emily's efforts to bring to the attention of the public what consequences of isolation can do and can be. I'm here to be a real testimony for that. And that's why I'm here this morning. Thank you for having me, Philadelphia Society of Ethics.
So we're ready to start, and we're going to start with a brief clip from Euripides' Medea. And it's a play written by Euripides in the 5th century BC, so written by a man for a predominantly male audience and performed entirely by men. And so it's very bold because it centers on a woman, and she's a foreign woman in a Greek land. And you probably know the story of Jason and the Argonauts, but maybe you're not as familiar with the sorceress Medea, who did everything to make sure that Jason survived and was able to go home with the golden fleece. So she gave everything up for him. And then she is betrayed essentially by her opportunistic husband, Jason. When they come back to Greece, he decides that they have small children together, but it's now inconvenient to be associated with her. And he could ascend better if he marries the princess, the local princess in Corinth. So here we are at a point where Medea has gone from desperation to a desire for revenge. And she has gradually come to a point where she is prepared to commit the unspeakable. So this is a bit of a spoiler alert. But Medea has decided to kill, through her magical powers, the king and his daughter, who is to marry Jason, in retaliation for the fact that she is going to be exiled. She has made a special plea for her children to be able to remain. And at the start of this scene, she has sent a special gift to the princess that will burn her alive. So she's waiting to hear back, and then she's going to hear from the nurse just before our scene that the gift has been received and her children can stay. So now she can go into exile and just survive as best she can. I'm going to share my screen now, and I just want to make sure that the sound is all right. Okay, here we go.
Oh, boys. Boys, you still have a city. The home where, leaving me for good, you will be cut off from your unhappy mother. I will be in exile in a foreign land, without the delight of watching you thrive, without the joy of preparing your weddings, tending the bath and the bed, lifting the torches. Oh, how much my own strong will has cost me. I get nothing, boys, from raising you, from running myself ragged with endless work. The birth pangs I endured were pointless. It pains me to think what hopes I had that would care for me in old age, and prepare me for burial when I die, the thing that everyone wants. But now that happy dream is dead. Deprived of you, I will live out my life in bitter grief, and you will embark on a different life. No more loving eyes for your mother. Why, boys, are you looking at me? Why do you smile for me this one last time? Oh, what should I do? I lost heart, my friends, and as soon as I saw their beaming faces, I can't do it. So much for my plans. I will take the boys away from here. Why make them suffer to hurt their father if it means that I suffer twice as much myself? I can't do that. So much for my plans. But wait, can I really bear to be laughed at? Let my enemies go unpunished? I have to steel myself. I can't be weak and let those tender thoughts take over. Children, into the house. And anyone who is out of place at my sacrifice can stay away. I will not spare my hand. But oh, my angry heart, do not go through with this. For all your pain, let the children live. I can be with you and bring you joy. And yet by the vengeful spirits of deepest Hades, there is no way I can allow my enemies to seize my children and mistreat them. I'm certain that they have to die, and so I should kill them, since I gave them life. It is all in place. She cannot escape. The crown is on her head. The royal bride revels in her new dress. I heard it clearly. Having set out myself on the darkest road, I will send my sons down one that's even darker. I will talk to them. Give me, my children, give me your mother, your hands to kiss. This hand, this mouth, this face. Oh, my dear ones, my noble sons. Be happy. But there, your father wrecked what we had here. Oh, the joy of holding them, of their tender skin, of their sweet breath. Go in, go in! I can no longer bear to look at you. My grief is too strong. I see the horror of what I'm doing. But anger overwhelms my second thought. Anger! Godless source of evil.
Okay, so Nafeesah, if you can unmute, we're going to dive into some of the prominent themes that come out of this scene and that you and I have discussed so often together. Here we see a woman pushed to the extreme, right? She's isolated, she's unrecognized, and made to feel completely powerless. And one of our focuses in all of our events has been the emotions, and how fascinating the ancients are in exploring the emotions as a factor of positive action and also potentially negative action. But there are no positive or negative actions or emotions in and of themselves. So anger, for example, can be a form of righteous indignation linked to justice. But Aristotle says it's not anger in and of itself that is a negative, but feeling the right degree of anger at the right time, in the right place, toward the right person. And this is true also of other emotions. So rather than eliminating the cognitive component of anger, he recognizes that. And yet, in Medea, we see someone who is clearly shifting from anger to something else, some sort of completely destructive and self-destructive fury. So bad productions of Medea, I should say, show a rabid, desperately angry, shrieking woman, and it's very dehumanizing. Here we have Tabitha Gale, a young actress that I met sort of serendipitously through a previous event, where she portrayed a mother in grieving so beautifully at a time when so many children were being separated by I said from their parents that it is cliched, but there was not a dry eye in the audience. And so here I chose her to portray Medea using Sheila Murnahan's translation. You've said to me, Nafeesah, that violence on the outside is a wound on the inside, and that you've known many women who have been through trauma to an extent that perhaps helped understand their powerlessness. Can you tell us a few more words about that? Is Medea a monster? Is she human? What's happening in this moment?
Well, Medea is a very unique moment. And, there is a passage that says, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And in this case, we're talking about a woman who gave up everything. Her family, she betrayed her family, killed her father. She's done numerous things that people would say were, just horrible. But she did that in the name of love, only to surrender, her power and go to a foreign land with someone who she considered to be her world, only to be betrayed by him as well. So what Medea is going through is something that many women experience, who have given up or have disconnected from family and loved ones to, have a family and in their minds be loved by the one who loves them the most, only to be betrayed. And so I know women who are incarcerated and are still incarcerated today because of situations, like that, where they were in marriages or in relationships with someone whom at first they thought this was the love of their life, only to discover that this person was not who they thought they were. Either they were being physically abused or mentally and emotionally abused, or, they found out that there was an affair. And so the way one reacts to that, you don't know unless you're in that situation. So we can't say that Medea is a monster. She's a woman scorned and she's acting out and she wants to be heard because Jason hasn't paid her any attention. He has not seen the signs that she's going through something. She's not happy. And because of that, we see what happens. So, like I did share with you before about particular women who have had very similar situations, like that.
That's right. And one of the main points that you've drawn out here is that there's no question that at a certain point she commits the unspeakable and the self-destructive, right? She goes from being human to beyond human. In her case, because she's the granddaughter of the sun, she has magical powers. So she's able to do something, but she's also, using your words, she said, I'm not going to feel anymore. She
Right.
has no recourse and she shuts down her humanity. Um,
Exactly.
could you say a few words about that, about the importance of support networks and connection, and what your experience was behind bars, how you were able to stay grounded, keep going, maintain hope, and what you think happens when some women do not have that? I know that in comparing male and visits to men and women's prisons, for example, is very telling.
Absolutely. What I will share is this, right? like we mentioned, Medea went to a foreign land. And what she wanted to do was to be accepted. Even though she's the granddaughter of, the sun god, she's also human, right? So she has both sides. And we have the ability to turn on and turn off whatever emotion we like, right? And in her case, she turned off the God in her, right? And then she turned on her humanity. So that was the woman who was trying to fit in with other women in society. However, in doing that, something horrible happened to her. She was betrayed. And we see how she goes from being this woman who's crying out to becoming something more. Like the rage grows, and she's described in many ways, like, even a beast. She's described as a raging bull, and then this lion. And she's just, you can see the escalation of the emotions that she's going through. And so you have, the uh the nurse, you have the choir, you have those who are there, but they're really not her support system. They're more like the spectators, right? And they feel bad for her, but no one is saying, do you need to talk? How can I help you? And one of the things that incarcerated people need, people who are alone, because you are in a strange land. You are a foreigner in that land called prison. And when you're there, you're isolated from your family members. And unless your family is coming to visit you, unless they're reaching out through letters or photographs, whatever, to let you know, hey, we're here. Whatever happened, happened, but you have the opportunity to change that. And we're here for you. If they don't have any kind of, community outside of that setting, then people tend to turn into something else. And that something else isn't always positive. That something else could be someone very reclusive, drawn in, and self destructive. And eventually, what happens is individuals act out because they're missing something. They're looking around them and they're seeing individuals who are getting regular visits, whose name is constantly being called for mail, who's sharing photos of their family and their children. And this person doesn't have that. And for many people, rage is born from that. And
Mhm.
then they want to become aggressive. So once again, a wound on the outside reflects a wound on the inside.
Mhm.
And for me, my experience, I was very fortunate that I have a great support network who not only encouraged me to, not let the time do me, but for me to do what I needed to do with the time I had. But I also had other individuals who were in the academic community who was able to help me as well, to give me something else to look at, and that goes into the organizing that I did around education inside, right? Um, but like you mentioned, and we had this conversation before, you can go to any male prison and you will see lines wrapped around the prison. And in those lines, you see women, you see mothers, you see wives, you see girlfriends, you see daughters, you see nieces, you see people who are coming there to visit these men and support them. If you go to a woman's prison, you're not going to see lines wrapped around. You're not going to see men in line to come and support the women in their lives. No, you may see sons coming to visit their mothers, fathers visiting their daughters, but it's rare to see a husband or a boyfriend or, a good friend just coming to visit this woman who's incarcerated, because the default assumption of incarceration is that this is something that is a male issue. Women are not supposed to be in prison. They should be home. They're not criminal. They're not deviant. But this is a reality, so.
Mhm. And to go back to one of the many central points that you've mentioned that are so powerful, you said that there was so much more. I said, what kept you going? And you said, there's so much more that I want to do. And I have people who love me. Who am I to destroy myself?
Right.
That's so central, of course, some sort of support network, but also the double standard for gender that you mentioned is something that interestingly applies with Medea, and a lot of scholars have compared the way Medea acts and what she does to another ancient hero, Ajax, who, as many of you will recall, turns against the Greek army when they don't recognize him for his contributions and give Achilles his armor to Odysseus. And he wreaks havoc and goes on a destructive bout. And that's typical heroic behavior for the ancients. That doesn't necessarily have a positive connotation. It can lead to positive things or negative. And destruction is what it leads to in the case of Ajax. And Medea is very similar to Ajax, leading us to question those gender, that double standard that you mentioned. So thank you so much for that. We're going to move on to our next clip from Sophocles' Philoctetes. This is a play that resonates with many of us today. I should say that the actor in it will be Martin Lewis, as well as Tabitha Gale, who I was delighted to get to meet, and who is someone who is especially interested in the theme of compassion. And it's central to this play. The play was written by Sophocles in the midst of an ongoing civil war and a time of distrust. And you're all familiar with the face that launched 1,000 ships and the fact that Helen was taken to Troy and the Greeks went to get her back. But you may not know this other story also of the expedition to Troy that involved the Greeks stopping on an island to worship. And Philoctetes steps accidentally on sacred ground and gets bitten by a serpent, and his wound festers, and he's smelly, and he screams in pain. And the Greeks decide this is bad for morale, it's inconvenient, and they abandon him on the island for 9 years. So he's alone. The island is not populated. And the way he's able to survive is he has a special bow that was given to him by Heracles at a moment when Heracles was burning alive on a funeral pyre. That's a long story, but nobody would light the pyre. So he was in excruciating pain, and Philoctetes had the courage to go up and put him out of his misery. And in exchange, in gratitude for that compassion, Heracles gave the bow to Philoctetes. In the excerpt that we're about to watch, we see the Greeks in a tight spot because 9 years later, they still haven't taken Troy, and they hear from a Trojan prophet that they're actually going to need Philoctetes and his bow to take Troy. So that's awkward, right? They have to go back to this man they abandoned for 9 years and say, we're so sorry, we need you now. So what could they use? They could use force, persuasion, or manipulation. Force is out of the question because of the bow. Persuasion is out of the question because why would he listen to them now? So they resort to manipulation, and they ask Achilles' son Neoptolemus to lie to him, make him his friend, and pretend he's taking him home to get him to board his ship. Neoptolemus is reluctant, but goes along with this plan because he's a young man desperate for recognition from his superiors. And then he witnesses Philoctetes' pain. He sits through these bouts of agony, and he gets to know the man and to respect the man that he has been essentially hoodwinking this time. So I'm going to share with you another clip with Tabitha Gale playing Philoctetes and Martin Lewis playing Neoptolemus. Just one moment. Here we go.
Come on. What's wrong? Why so awful still all of a sudden? What's the matter?
Nothing. Keep going, son.
You in pain? The usual?
No, I think it's getting better. Good gods!
Then why the groaning? Why call on the gods?
So that they'll come make it better. Oh, God!
What's coming into you? Speak, say something. I know something's wrong.
Son, I've had it. I can't hide the pain from you. Oh, God! It runs right through me. Through me. I'm miserable. Damn. I'm done for. It's eating me alive, son. I'm gone. Oh, for the gods, you have a sword handy at hand. Use it. Cut the heel off now. Now, no mind my life. Quick, son. Quick.
Why all of a sudden now? What's new? All this screaming and hollering.
You know.
What?
My boy, you know.
No, what? What's the matter with you?
You have to know.
Your disease. It's unbearable.
Unbearable beyond words. Pity me.
What should I do?
Don't let me down. Don't be afraid. This wandering disease comes to me, and when it's tired wandering, and when it's had enough, it goes away.
Every misery there is shows through you. Should I hold you? Give you a helping
No.
hand?
Don't touch. But take the bow, please. Like you asked to. Watch till the pain goes away. Guard it. I'll pass out asleep when the fit passes, or the pain won't leave. I have to. Yet let me sleep in peace, and if those men come by the gods above, I beg you, don't give them or anyone else the bow, willingly or unwillingly, or you'll destroy yourself and kill me. Oh, I'm begging you.
Don't worry. This passes into no one's hands but yours and mine. Give it here, and with it, good luck.
Here, son. Take it. Pray the gods don't envy you so that the bow won't destroy you the way it did me, and him who owned it before me.
Gods, give us this. Make it so we sail with the swift and following wind, wherever the heavens send us, and our mission ends.
My boy, I'm afraid you're praying for nothing. Look. New dark blood oozing out of somewhere deep, dripping red again. I expect a fresh, worse attack. Oh, oh my foot. You excruciate me. The pain slithers up, right near here. Oh, oh. Now you know. Don't go. Oh, Odysseus, my friend. If only this agony could stab through you. God, God, God. My General Menelaus, General Agamemnon, if only your flesh fed this sickness as long as mine has. Ah! Death every day. I beg you, what's keeping you? Why don't you come? My boy, you're a good boy. Why don't you pick me up? Burn me in that fire out there. Lemnian fire. I did the same for Heracles, son of Zeus. For that I got the arms that you have there now. What say? What say? Speak! Why so quiet? Where are you?
Here. A long time here, heartsick over your crushing pain.
No. Be brave too, my boy. The thing drops in quickly, it goes quickly too. Just please. Don't leave me here alone.
Don't worry. We'll stay with you.
You will?
Absolutely.
Not that I'd ask you to swear to that, my boy.
Don't worry. It's not right to leave without you.
Your hand on that. Give it.
I promise. We'll stay.
Now, up there. Take me.
What? Where there?
Up. Up.
Another fit. Why are you looking up? The sky?
Let me go. Let go.
To go where?
Let me go.
I won't.
You kill me holding me like that.
Okay. Now that you've calmed down.
Oh, Earth, take my dying body. I can't stand up under the pain.
I think sleep will grip him soon. Look, his head jerked back, his whole body soaked in sweat. The dark blood of a burst vein trickling from his heel. Let's leave him in peace, friends, so he can sleep.
There's so much in this play, and it's so fascinating to have a scene where we know that this young man has been lying the whole time. And at the same time, so we don't know where he is in his head. We can only trust his words, but we can see from his face that obviously witnessing the pain of Philoctetes is changing him inside. And it's a scene that really explores the etymology of compassion. Aristotle uses the word pity, not in the condescending sense that we sometimes understand it, but really in the sense of sympathy, to use the Greek roots, or compassion, which means suffering with. And as you probably noticed, one of the focuses of the scene is, please don't go. So the themes of isolation and pain, and at the same time, the counterpart, which is the importance of human contact, of human touch and human presence that we've all also been so acutely aware of in these last few months to help alleviate any pain, physical or mental. So with that in mind, Marquis, when we first read this play together, you said it resonated in so many ways. And one of the points that you brought out was the dehumanization that comes with isolation behind bars. Could you speak to that?
Again, thank you for having me in Philadelphia Society. When I read the classics myself, they come off to me as an early DSM. They're actually telling us about the human condition, right? And we see in Medea and we see in Ajax a real concern, a real negative reaction or response to the very idea of isolation, right? Having lived through mass incarceration since my adolescence, I've actually experienced the disintegration of isolation, right? The loss of communication, the medium by which human connection is established, right, or maintained. When we say dehumanize, the classic definition is to deprive us of positive human qualities, right? And those positive human qualities, autonomy, dignity, things of this nature, purpose, right? All those things come together. And so when we say that Philoctetes in that moment was experience a dehumanization as a consequence of, we really see the human need for contact in his desire, or well, his begging that he not be left. Right now in prison, you have constant threat of that loss, right? The guy next to you, your best friend for so many years, now is just gone the next day, shipped off to another prison, right? Every bond you try to establish beyond, well, especially in terms of mass incarceration, long-term incarceration, right? Every relationship you try to establish is challenged by like all the vicissitudes of life. And at some point, They wither away. Your friends die off. You know, your parents die off. And again, you find yourself in a deeper degree of limnos, a deeper degree of isolation and aloneness. And at some point, you become kind of numb to the point where, I guess, you know how human beings have defense mechanisms that we're not even cognitively aware of. We're not volitionally trying to make these things happen. We're not trying to become numb to defend ourselves against the pain. It's just a defense mechanism that kicks up like our immune system. And before you know it, like I didn't even know how numb mass incarceration or prison had made me until I came home. My friend for like 30 years told me the other day, I'm glad you just had a child. I said, why? He said, because you're not connected to anything. You're not connected to anybody. I said, what do you mean? He said, you said, if somebody's there, good. If they're not there, that's okay too. And that was a condition of losing, constantly losing contact with people on love. I heard Nafeesah speak about how women will come to the prison more than men. It seems to me that there is a strength in female cohesion that is stronger maybe than we find in men for whatever reason, right? I don't know the reason. I'm not trying to, but I witnessed that. I witnessed that, and so now when me and my peers constantly are separated, right? We actually have developed a practice where we didn't make contact with people unless they wrote us, right? We wouldn't write down an address, right? We wouldn't write down an address because we didn't want to constantly be reaching out to be disappointed, right? So if you wrote us, we'll write you back, throw the letter away. Now, if you wrote us again, then we had contact with you. But if you didn't, we didn't have contact with you and it wasn't on us. It wasn't our fault. You understand what I'm saying? And that was a way of defending ourselves. And now that I've come home, right, and my friend is telling me, my sister is telling me, my father is telling me that I don't have that type of empathetic connection that is like typical to like normal human behavior. Okay, now I'm saying I appreciate these platforms because we need to actually talk about it. When Philoctetes says, son, how you must know, I'm saying to society, you must know the effects on our human condition that this long-term incarceration has. And we have to actually question whether that consequence is worth whatever we're supposed to be affecting in corrections.
Mm-hmm. So we're essentially teaching people to become numb, right? And that's such a terrifying thought because first of all, we see what happens in Medea when she shuts down her humanity and her vulnerability and feeling, but also because the Philoctetes really puts at the center the importance of compassion, not just as a squishy little emotion, but as a civic duty, right? As something that is central to the survival of the community, right? It was Philoctetes' compassion that helped Heracles, and it is the compassion that Neoptolemus comes to feel for Philoctetes that's going to change the course of the manipulation, and they will eventually take Troy. So the idea of creating an environment essentially, if not designed for, then that results in teaching people to become numb because otherwise the repeated wounding is too painful, seems to have very strong consequences for the rest of society. I want to end because I know we're running out of time on a bigger question that some may be wondering and we're often asked about, which is that there's a tremendous lack of vocational tools being taught behind bars. You did 27 years and you've mentioned that that has been tremendously lacking, but people might say then, well, why would you then value reading the humanities and reading the classics behind bars? Surely you need vocational tools and that's sort of a side or a luxury. What's your response to that?
No, I agree with him. We do need a vocational tools. We need to have intrinsic worth and value within ourselves, right? Which is like crazy that you could spend 27 years in prison and not walk out with vocations, right? But even more important than any vocational trade or skill of that nature, you need to know how to be human. If I'm an engineer or a scientist, right, and I'm not really fully developed in my humanity, right, enough to exercise or entertain my higher angels, then what am I going to design? Except things that contribute to the, the the goals of my lower nature, right? The selfish pursuit, right? I'm either game, like I'm trying to play game theory, right? Or you know, gangster, right? Now is either game of gangsters, right? So it's either like war or manipulation. It's not something that's going to be created to benefit all mankind. Something that's going to help us have a better relationship with the earth. If we're not human, you see what I'm saying? Being engineered is a double-edged sword, right? You can go either way, you know. And so I think that while vocational trades and all kinds of academic education is important, nothing is more important than developing a functional human being. And I don't think a human being is functional if he has not developed apprehension of those faculties that facilitate empathy, compassion, and sympathy, because those are the connections that make us human, right? Without those, you're not actually human. We're not reptiles, Emily. We weren't born in an egg or in isolation. There was always a meeting up, right? There's always the X and the Y. There's the umbilical cord connected to the mother. You come out to the extended family, etc. So we are social creatures, right? And if we are cultivated in isolation, how then does that accommodate, you know, a better human being?
I want to close with something else in Philoctetes that resonated in a way that might perhaps be surprising. But as you were reading it, you wrote to me, the separation from comrades, the feeling of ineffable loss on coming out of prison is something that comes out of this play. And I said, oh, is it grief? And you said just something irreconcilably vacuous in me.
Yeah.
At which point I asked, so are you talking about when you were in solitary confinement or during the 27 years or when? And you said, I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about right now. And that's something that people don't often think about, which is based on everything that we've said, right? That being taught to be numb, the not having vocational skills. What is it about Philoctetes that resonates with the challenges of being a re-entering citizen?
There's a couple of ways I can address that. But for the most part, you know, I watch my baby, I watch my baby, and my baby has a demand on life, right? My baby go into a rage when he's not getting proper contact and attention, right? And so when we find that rage is a theme of isolation, right? We kind of understand that, at least in the heart, we understand the need for connection, right? We understand there's an absolute need for it. And so, you know, I'm in awe right now. Right? I'm in awe right now. But I think that Philoctetes,
You mentioned Philoctetes, I should add, when he's told to come on board ship, refuses to, adamantly. Neoptolemus reveals the manipulation, and he says, well, then it's out of the question, right? And you said, I can't re-enter what I was never into. It's like going into a foreign land. How would you?
You remember the language again is ineffable, is ineffably vacuous. Like again, because this is not intellectual property; it's heartfelt stuff. There's a issue of abandonment. Of it's an indignation. It's something that's so godforsaken, right? So unforgivable about a society that discards a human being as if there was nothing. I think I was like, feel like Philoctetes means more valuable than a thing or something to that effect. And that's what you're made to feel like, a thing. And you don't want to re-enter into anything that could treat you with that much disregard. Like anything that could treat you with that much abuse is not something that you willingly want to be a part of again. So it's not just women scorned, right? They'll have no fear, like a human being scorned. And I think that is such an offense to the soul, right? It's such an offense to the heart. It's such an offense to the core of what it means to be human, that we find in the society that's capable of that, at the very least, difficult, if not impossible, to enter into again with good faith, right?
And as in closing, in building on that, there was one crucial moment early on. I think you were just in county jail, and you were in your early 20s, and someone made a gesture that is the quintessential compassionate gesture, right? Of perhaps suffering along with, or identifying with, and understanding where you're at. Could you address that in closing?
Yeah, I would love to. All right, Philadelphia Society. So I'm a young man. I just entered into the prison system. I'm looking for friends, support. That support we're talking about with Nafeesah, that support system, right? I'm looking for simple things: shower shoes, stamps, writing paper, things that I need to contact my family, etc. Right? And again, I'm like Ajax out here. I just sacrificed for my friends, and here I am in prison, and I can't get these simple things. And so one night I go in my room and I find a book by Naim about community itself. I find a Danish, I find shower shoes, I find stamps, right? And so I don't know who gave me this stuff, but I'm so grateful that I got it. A couple of days later, I find out who gave it to me. It was a guy named Old Man Sadiq, right? And Old Man Sadiq, he had looked on me with human compassion, right? With compassion, human sympathy. When I say compassion, I'm talking about common suffering, right? He could empathize with me and feel my pain. He put himself in my position, and that was allow him to sympathize and give me what I needed. And first and foremost, like the book, Community Itself, gave me my first look at introspection when I began to explore the internal landscape and became more aware of my humanity and more empowered by it, right? But more so than that, it was like I was it was like a pilot light. Like he had passed on something human to me, right? That made me want to make other people feel precisely what he made me feel, even though I had never known charity until that moment. Everything in my life had always been quid pro quo. What I mean? That was the first time I had actually received the charity that is the proper benefit, right? And the prosperity that comes out of a healthy humanity. Mm-hmm. And all I know is I wanted to make others feel that. And I think that's what we all do in the ethical society. So we appreciate you guys.
Thank you. That is so powerful. And I know that the format involves a question and answer period, and we can handle that in whatever way the Philadelphia Ethical Society usually does, perhaps with questions in the chat or with hands raised. I leave it to Drew, but thank you again so much for inviting us, and to all of you who are here. We're going to begin the Q&A now. And thank you again, Marquis and Nafeesah, for being here.
It was my pleasure. My pleasure.
I see that Diana W. has her hand raised. I'll ask you to unmute, and you can go ahead.
Greetings, Ethical Society community, greetings, guests and presenters. I actually started an orientation today, and I'm on a break from orientation. So I joined late. I grew up in the Philadelphia Ethical Society and have been away for many years, and today is my first time back to a platform in about 5 years. That was powerful. I really appreciate you all coming to present that. I really just wanted to be able to say that making the connection between that, the connections I heard between the assault of mass incarceration, the request for reentry, because I'm working a couple of different reentry programs, and juxtaposing that with the
Euripides, yeah.
Euripides, excellent. And that was really excellent. And I think that's a wonderful way in. Marquis, I think that your way of discussing humanity was just so poignant. And I hope to be able to contact you and to get you all to come and speak for me at the Philadelphia Center. So I really just wanted to say thank you, and how much I appreciated this kind of interesting door and the topic of humanity, because often presenters on mass incarceration use deficit models and charity models, and this was neither of those. Powerful.
Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you. And please be in touch in the chat or afterwards. And I can also post my email in the chat for anybody who would like to be in touch as well. I'll send it to Drew and he can share it. Thank you for that. Let's definitely be in touch.
Thank you, Diana, and welcome back. In the chat, Miguel has a question asking, what made you decide to study specifically classics in prison? Not sure if that's for you, Emily, or also for those also involved, Nafeesah or Marquis.
Marquis, I'll let you speak to that. I think that the question puts his finger on an unequal power dynamic within the prisons, even as we go into teach, which is that, of course, we get to choose the material. And there are various ways that we try to remediate that. The reason I chose to teach the classics is that's my expertise, and also because I feel so powerfully that they bring out the humanity that we all share in addressing every aspect of the self, and not just the ones that we're willing to share with others, if that makes sense. And the ways in which that power dynamic can sometimes be ameliorated, and it's imperfect and it's impossible, I think. But that I try is that I have students submit a list to me at the end, if they want, of readings and clips and movies and recipes and music. And I'm still working my way through it. Some of them are 3 pages long, and I learn so much from it. And it informs future iterations of my teaching, where I can bring in more comparative material. But Marquis, you had a choice of classes to take, or I guess, and boy, did you engage. Marquis wrote an extra essay after the class was over on empathy, actually. So I'd love to hear you speak to what it is about that material that drew you to decide to write an extra essay.
Yeah, no. I think, brother, that question is almost like asking, why would you choose water when you're starving, right? Like, I'm in limbo, so I'm in a place that's trying to deny me my humanity, right? So what could speak more to my need to satisfy my relief than to discover, you know what I mean, in so many epic heroes, that I'm not alone in my deviance, right? That I'm not, worthy of discarding because of my waywardness, right? Like my fall into my catabasis, right? Like I'm human. Like I'm as sometimes I'm as epic as Hercules, right? To some people, you ask them, I'm a hero, right? And then to others, I'm Heracles, right? Like I have traumas, I have issues of the human condition that might lead me to like him is post-traumatic syndromes, right? Like I can fall and I can rise. And so being able to identify with these characters, right, at a time when all we getting is condemnation, all we getting is this snobbery about our ability to be deviant or bad or wrong, right? And all human beings are capable of this, right? And so being able to identify with that and is also to learn how to get back up, how to get back and to reclaim your humanity, right? To say, hold on, man, it's one thing to be guilty and be accountable, right? But it's another thing to be sitting here being condemned to the point where I now feel like I'm not worthy of life and living, right? So I don't even think I chose the humanity. I think the humanity just chose me at that moment, right? I think it just chose me, and it was just right. It was just right. It came at the right time, at the right place to help me remember that we are human, right? Right, that we do have contributions. You remember when you said Philoctetes was the one that needed to come back and help out the situation. So here it is, a whole bunch of people who are more than qualified, better qualified probably than those who study in institutions. I'm talking about people who live the real life, the prostitute, the junkie, everybody, all these people with their insight and their perspective, right? And their empathy and their understanding, who have shared experiences, right? Shared suffering with all these people out here, right? Who are better qualified to come back and be a solution to the problem. These are the same people that we sitting here condemning, right? right? And so, again, when I see things like that and it sparking me and it encourages me, that is what the humanities is for. It lifts us back up. So again, I don't think I chose it. It chose me. It just.
Thank you. That's really powerful. And Nafeesah and I met not in prison, but started our discussions after. And so I think I'm all the more curious, Nafeesah, and I see a question coming for you here, but it wasn't a given that these plays would appeal to you and that you would want to discuss them. But I remember the first day, I think we were on the phone for 2 hours and it was just nonstop. And maybe the question that I'm seeing here in the chat is one way to address why it grabbed you. Emily Edzo asks, Nafeesah, do you feel that we excuse the behavior of male heroes more freely than female heroes? If so, do you think this is a timeless problem in real life and in literature?
I would say yes. Historically, women are condemned. We even see that in the Bible. Not only that, but there's that saying that there is that saying that boys will be boys. So it's easy to say that, this is something normal for men. But for women, we condemn them. They should be docile. They should not be confrontational. They should be homemakers. There's still that idea that women are supposed to fit into a particular box. And that is where we as a society, we really missed the ball on that by coming up with these social constructs on how a woman is supposed to be and easily forgive that of our male counterparts. It's a mistake.
And one of the major consequences of that you've mentioned to me is that as a result, they are disconnected and alienated from their families, and the lack of a support network leads to a breakdown that we've seen in an extreme case with Medea. But I think that also, and I don't have the numbers to back this, but I think it's anecdotally been brought up to me by many instructors in women's prisons that the suicide rate is considerably higher, and that no doubt is connected to what you've said. I'm going to go back to Drew because I'm unable to speak and keep track of the chat, and to see if there are any other questions before our time is up.
I wanted to ask Emily, when she was doing her studies in classics, what was it that drove you to think about people in prison and to want to go and reach out to people in prison? Was there anything specific, or did you just, how did you get there?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure that the teaching of the classics specifically is what drew me to want to find a way to teach in prisons, but I definitely felt, based on the works themselves and also on student responses on the outside, that the discussions would be incredible, and that I wouldn't be, the one-way instructor, but that this would be a seminar where I would be learning just as much from the reactions to these works. And this has been true to a degree beyond anything I could have expected. Euripides has a tremendous play, The Trojan Women, about the consequences of a war for women, for those who lose, and the human toll. And it's a difficult play. It's beautiful poetry, but it's essentially a long lament. And so some students on the outside, I think, just think it's a very long lament, and they sometimes just don't connect to it as much. And it's women lamenting, I should add. So when I assigned it as reading in a men's prison, I asked, so how was it? Was this just a kind of a dull, long lament about suffering? And they said, absolutely not. This resonates directly with us. It's about community. It's about survival through song. It's about resilience. So in many ways, I'm realizing just how much the classics not have the ability one way to bring something to individuals everywhere, but the ways in which their readings of them can illuminate us and also, again, bring out our shared humanity at a time when we so desperately need that sense.
Thank you.
Looks like William Moulton has asked, what reactions surprised you the most?
So that's a question for me, I guess. I think that the one that I just mentioned is one of them. Certainly, right? A play that's difficult. I think that the attention to the poetry and to similes in particular in Homer, and to the beauty of the similes, but also interpreting their meaning, has been mind blowing, frankly. So there's a point in Iliad, book 24. You're all familiar with the fact that Priam, king of Troy, comes to humble himself before Achilles in order to get the body of his dead son Hector back, and he's compared in a very intriguing simile to a man who has committed a murder elsewhere and is coming into another place to as a guest. And scholars ponder this a lot, thinking, well, why are they comparing a vulnerable old man kissing the hands of the individual who killed his son to so strangely in such a puzzling simile? And I couldn't cover all of it here, but the feedback and the input that I received made me completely rethink how I read that simile. And that's just one example among many. I mean, I think I'm working on a book, and I'm collaborating on a book also with formerly incarcerated citizens about these things, because there's so much there that I think everyone would benefit to hear. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Doris asks, any thoughts on how to engage high school students with behavior problems in the classics?
I am going to pass that one on to the two experts. So Nafeesah has been doing work visiting schools, and I'm very curious, Nafeesah, if we're going to do a gig where we go in and talk about Medea or any of the classics, what your thoughts are on that. And I know that little Nasara maybe needing you right now. So if it's not a good time, that's fine. But I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Yes. Well, yeah, she's good, but she has a lot to say in the background.
Good.
Yeah, so I spend quite a bit of time traveling to various schools throughout the state. Yeah, she's talking. And so the one thing that I discovered in sharing my story and the tragedies and the traumas that, I experienced, is that when you can show young people that they are not the only ones who've experienced particular things, it doesn't matter how it's presented to them, they're going to get it because it feels real. So they need to feel a connection. If there is no connection, then it's just going to fall on deaf ears. There's not going to be any interest.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say definitely make sure that what's shared with them, there is a definite connection that they all can appeal to and say, wait a minute, this is me, or I know someone who this resembles. So yeah, I would definitely say that.
Well, I'm going to team up with you. You say that like that would be me, but we're going to go in there together for sure. And we'll bring Medea. I also wanted to pass this on to Marquis because it reminded me of the whole notion of a purpose. You said that dignity and an intrinsic sense of human worth is attached to purpose and having a sense of purpose. And so with all the struggles of reentry that you are facing, Marquis, what is your purpose now? What do you think you could contribute to youth in particular?
Well, my experience. In the same way, I look. You remember Sun Tzu said you can deal with 1,000 like you do with one, and one like you do with 1,000. Like whenever I get to thinking about what I could benefit, it's I start at home. I charity start at home, and so I'm thinking about my nephews. Like I might not have a whole bunch of successes, but I got a big bag of failures, right? I got a big bag of what's not right about being human, right? And so I kind of boil down this concept of doing the right thing, right, to identifying the wrong thing and getting really good at not doing that, right? So things of that nature is simply that's simply what I can contribute, right?
Mhm.
I can share the the temptations of life, right? I can tell the strain of trying to be a black man in the white male dominated power structure. I could share, the psychological split between the psychological split between whether you was going in black codes, whether you was going to go on a plantation or not. I could share isolation versus entering into mainstream. There's humanity. That's what I can share. This is what the humanities has really, really brought home for me as a capstone, right? As a capstone.
Mhm. Would you have them read
Oh,
Heracles or
yeah, yeah,
Philippides or
yeah,
take
yeah,
a chunk
yeah,
of them?
definitely. Without question, like when you talk about the high school student, listen, I've discovered that link between emotions and imagination. And if you capture the imagination like that play Hamilton, just
Mhm.
upgrade it a little bit so that it speaks to their vibe, right? It does the same thing. It already does that. It captures, it helps them resonate, it helps them identify all the things they're going through. It's already there. The humanities has already provided that. But I just wanted to finish on this note, is that the humanities brought me into contact with my higher angels, right? A cognitive component. We always felt it, right? We intuitively know it, but we can't articulate it and navigate it like that, right? What the humanities brought me into contact with this concept of compassion and a better understanding of it, right? That common suffering, right? When you willingly link into that common suffering, it encourages every human being to want to contribute to whatever effort it takes to end that suffering. That's the point of linking into it, so that we all collectively want to bring an end to it,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that's what I can share: compassion, and let it guide the way it guides.
Yes, and what you said about the role of the imagination in compassion reminds me directly of Aristotle's definition of pity. Again, pity he uses as a synonym mainly for sympathy or compassion when he says that it's essentially the pain that you feel when you perceive the suffering of another individual and you essentially imagine that it could happen to you or someone that you love and that it could happen soon. So the ability to feel compassion is predicated on the ability to put yourself in another's shoes. And I always use the example of the subway, the New York subway with my students, because very often those who give alms are not necessarily those who are better off. In fact, sometimes quite the contrary, but those who feel perhaps closest to the difficult circumstances of those who are asking for help. So that connection between imagination and the necessary ability to put ourselves in others' shoes was very powerfully brought out by what you just said. Thank you. If there are more questions, we're happy to take some.
Yeah, it looks like in the chat, um, Miguel asked a follow-up from Marquis. Of all the texts you've studied, what particular situation and or hero resonated the most with you in particular?
Uh, See, that's an unfair question, Miguel, because again, because the humanities is actually addressing the whole of man, it's evaluating man in every possible scenario to try to get a look at what he does in those particular contexts. They all are equally valuable to me. Like they transcend, just one scenario. Like I identify with Medea, right? Like not a gender thing, but just like see Ajax when he's disregarded, you see how their response is the same. It's a human thing, and it's telling me what it is to be human. It's telling me about what it means to be so abused that you become disconnected, you disintegrate, some type of nervous condition happen, you fall into madness and all that other stuff. And all that stuff is valuable. It helps me understand that I can't mistreat human beings, nor can I tolerate being mistreated, right? We'll look at somebody like Achilles, right? We'll watch when my anger has gone too far, when it's beyond righteous indignation and go to left. And now instead of being a hero, I become a bully, right? It helped me identify with that. We watch with the clever Odysseus, right? We watch the clever Odysseus, who at the one hand is right, very, very clever, but on the other hand, we see him become duplicitous, right? And all that stuff has helped me understand the the scale of what it means to be human, right? there is no single narrative. There's no single text. They're all helping me understand the full Constitution. Man, like I said, it's like a DSM for me, and it kind of tell me, what is there, what is possible, what can be the consequences of. There is no single one. I could not pick a single one. They're all equally valuable to the ongoing dialogue that is humanities, right?
Thank you for that, and it's very powerful to think about how the classics, in particular, have characters who transcend individual identities and represent all of humanity. And Nafeesah, I'm curious. The Philoctetes is actually a pretty rare play, Sophocles' Philoctetes, in that it's all men, right? Because he's on an island, Philoctetes is, and because they're going to war, and then they're coming back to bring him to the war. So that's why. And yet, Nafeesah, you said that the Philoctetes resonated with you very much. If you could maybe speak to one aspect of that.
Oh, definitely. So one aspect that just automatically comes to mind is that feeling of desertion and being incarcerated. Like I said, you're in a foreign land, right? And so you're not there with your loved ones. And it's just this feeling of the people who you thought would be there for you are not there. And what do you do? How do you survive that? And you go through this cycle in your mind, and that cycle results to a numbing because you don't want to feel, and you've gone beyond the anger. And so for me, that was definitely something that I experienced because, like Marquis mentioned earlier, it's that loss, that constant loss, and that feeling of not wanting to get close to anyone else, that feeling of not wanting to allow anyone else to get in. So you begin to alienate yourself. However, something that happens is, and in Philoctetes, someone comes to get him. Now, there was another agenda,
Mm-hmm.
but someone came to get him, to rescue him. And that is something that happened to me. It happened to me while I was incarcerated, and also when I came home and started to feel that feeling of desertion and alienation. And it was a dear friend who had to remind me of just who I am, and it was like a rescue. And it gave you something like to hold on to, like, wait a minute, it doesn't stop here. And so you begin to feel again. And what you begin to feel is yourself, your life. It's still there. With Philoctetes, his foot was, injured and it smelled. And there's so much you could say about that, right? And it was that smell that made people want to steer away because it was decaying. It was that death. But that's also something that happens to people who are internally wounded. People get a sense from them that they need to just stay away. Something's not right. I don't want to be around that because that person is wounded. But it's not until someone comes, usually that support that says, hey, yeah, I know about that wound, but that wound can heal if you'll allow it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something else, what you will allow.
Yes, that's so powerful and prompting some other thoughts that about Philoctetes in connection with that. One of them is that he's so eager when he finally sees someone and someone who speaks his language. Neoptolemus is there for contact, for language, and at the same time there is this deep-seated fear that you just described, that this connection is going to be like all the other sailors who stopped by on the island, who are just going to sail on, and then he'll be again left to his own devices. And to your point about the wound being able to heal, something else in the play that is so striking is that unlike Oedipus, who, you know, rids Thebes of the plague and then, I'm sorry, of the Sphinx, and then ends up being the one who brought the plague upon his city. So the one who was the savior turns out to be the poison. In Philoctetes, I like to say that we see the opposite, in that the one who was deemed the social pariah, who was smelly and disgusting and disruptive and just not useful and bad for morale, was set aside. Well, the Trojan prophet says this individual is actually essential to the survival of the community, to victory at Troy, to bringing everybody back together. And so, back to your point about a wound can heal, but also a wound can be a healer. It struck me from what you were saying, because only if you've felt that wound, right, can you turn to others and really truly experience that compassion that can help with their healing. So that wound is, as you said, can seem to be an impediment to connection to some who are concerned about it, but it can be a factor and a bridge for so many others desperately in need. You have a response to that, I see. Go ahead.
Oh, me?
I think Nafeesah was raising her hand, and then you, Marquis.
That's interesting that he's raising his hand as well, because I'm going to kind of reveal something. Marquis, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to out you here. So for me, a rescue while I was incarcerated was Marquis. Marquis and I wrote each other for several years. And once again, you're talking about two wounded people. And if he had not ever felt that which I was feeling, I would not have been able to connect and start to relate and to understand many aspects of what I was going through that incarceration. You know, he served almost 30 years, you know, and so here it is. I served almost 12 years, 9 months, 3 days, who's counting? But it was through that connection that I no longer felt deserted. I no longer felt alienated. And I was able to tune in to many different aspects of understanding that I, you know, previously to being introduced to him would not have encountered. So it's once again someone who speaks your language, and it's healing. It's definitely healing. It is the medicine. So the wound can become the healer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to point out that in his divine providence, that was the whole point of putting compassion as a capstone to our humanity. You're plugging into the wound so that you can be encouraged to contribute to the healing. You see?
Absolutely. Yes. And I wasn't going to mention this connection, but I will say that it was completely serendipitous. I had already been working with Marquis after his release, and then I had met Nafeesah and felt that we could have some great conversations. And then eventually I thought, well, we should all do something together. And that's when it came up. This is literally completely by chance. Both of them separately told me, oh, you know, I actually know this person. Yeah, we were pen pals years ago. How many years ago? 16 years ago? Something like that.
Well, so, yeah, that was my friend, man. That was my friend. She was my Theseus, right? She jumped in the pit with me, man. And you know, through her, I kind of like learned friendship, right? I learned like, you know, a friend either gonna help you get out or they're gonna jump in with you to help navigate through it. And I think we was like navigating through it together. And that made it a lot less painful to deal with.
So just to unpack that reference, the reference is to the end of Euripides is Heracles, when Heracles, in a bout of madness inflicted on him by Hera, has killed his family, his wife and his children, and then he regains his senses and realizes what he's done, and he chooses or attempts to or decides to commit suicide. And along comes his friend Theseus. And if you have an hour ahead of you, go find Euripides' Heracles. It's the wonder of the web that you can find that right now. And you could look at the end to really see what Marquis is referring to there as well.
Well, I think with that, we will end here. I want to thank Emily. I want to thank Nafeesah and Marquis for a wonderful program today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we truly enjoyed having you with us today.